Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kotaku. I'm Dan Mortelli.
And I'm Nick Cooper.
We're going to start off the Kotaku series by interviewing Nick, and after that, in the coming weeks, we'll probably have an interview of me. So stay tuned for that. Anyways, let's get started here with Nick's interview. So, Nick, you've been in Japan now for a couple of years, but I heard you studied abroad here. So what like how could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was in university, my major was linguistics, and we also had to choose one language to study as well. So I chose Japanese, and in my second year of university, I had the opportunity to study for 1 year in Tokyo, in Hachioji. Um, so yeah, when I was 20 years old, I first came to Japan. Um, of course, Tokyo is a giant city, and it was very different from my hometown, Brisbane, in Australia, like 10 times the population. So it was a very different new experience. It was my first time traveling overseas, so everything was new to me. Not just the language, but the culture, and yeah, it was a really, really, really fun experience for the whole year.
I also heard that you've lived in Korea as well. How did that come about?
Yep. So after my year on exchange, I went back to Australia and graduated, and after that, I got a job in Hyogo Prefecture as a ALT for 3 years. Whilst
Hmm.
I was an ALT, I studied for my master's degree, and so
Hmm.
after 3 years, I managed to get a job in Gyeongnam University, which is a university in Masan, which is near Busan. Um, so yeah, I was 25 years old when I moved to Korea. Um, it was an interesting experience because I'd studied Japanese for so long, and then suddenly I have to go back down to the beginning in a different country with a different language. So it was a little bit strange for me because I had already been through all these steps. I had already lived in a country for the first time, not really knowing the language, and it kind of felt a bit like deja vu. Um, Doing the same kind of learning process again in a different language. Um, but no, Korea was a very interesting place to live. Um, it's similar to Japan in a lot of ways, and also different. So it felt kind of like a what's it called, a parallel universe. Like things I can understand the same, but also it's not quite the same, and yeah, but I think definitely my experience living in Japan and living overseas and learning Japanese definitely helped me adjust to Korean life.
So you've lived in several places in Japan, Tokyo, and then Hyogo, and now Shizuoka. Could you compare? Could you compare the three?
Uh, right. So my first time in Japan was Tokyo, and I guess I was younger then than I am now. So as a 20-year-old coming to Japan for the first time, going overseas for the first time, it had a very big kind of wow factor. Um, because it was so different to uh, my city and Australia. So uh, for 1 year, it was a very special year living as an exchange student. There's lots of experiences that normal people don't really have. Um, so yeah, I got to experience pretty much the good points of Tokyo without the bad. Like, if you only live there for a year, you don't really get this feeling that it's too semi, that it's too crowded or anything like that. But if I lived there more than 1 year, I think I would not enjoy Tokyo as much. It's definitely nice to visit, but I don't think I would like to live there. On the other hand, Hyogo, um, I lived in a very small town called Shiso, which has the most difficult name in kanji in all of Japan, I've heard. No one knows where Shiso is, even in Hyogo. Um, and that was the complete opposite of Tokyo. It was a small village in the mountains, no train station, um, completely cut off from other parts of Hyogo, and so left, right, up, down, just mountains everywhere. I caught a bus every day to work, and there was a river that wound around the mountains. It was like a postcard. It was so beautiful, and I would love to live there compared to Tokyo, but it's a small village, so there's no university, of course. For a career, it's not a really useful place to live. But I think if I was a child again, I think it would be a very fantastic place to live or to raise a family, I guess. And now Shizuoka, it's kind of like a bit in the middle. Like, it's obviously, Hamamatsu is a city, so it's bigger than the village I was in Hyogo. It's also a lot smaller than Tokyo. So yeah, Shizuoka is just very like in the middle. Well, I guess geographically it is kind of just in the middle, but also just between the two extremes of Tokyo is the biggest city and Shiso is a small mountain village. Hamamatsu is just the middle ground of it's a nice place to live. Not as much scenery as in the mountains, but it's also a bit more spacious and not as crowded as Tokyo. So yeah.
All right, thanks. Keeping on the topic of places, if to any students who are thinking about studying abroad in Australia, like kind of advice or tips or pointers or anything, recommendations that you might have.
Sure. So, I'm sure most students know of the two biggest cities, Melbourne and Sydney. And there's a lot of exchange students and international, what's it called, working holiday visa people, and it's a very vibrant international community. But because they're the two biggest cities, they're also the most expensive. And the thing that I think Japanese people should really consider is that if you, for example, if you're working a part-time job in Japan, you get like 900 senen an hour. In Australia, you get about 2 senen. So, on the other hand, things are more expensive in Australia. So if you're working in Australia, the cost of living is fine, but if you were a Japanese person going to Australia to study and you're going to use your savings, you'll find it, well, double, twice the price. So if you're only going to go there to study, I would suggest not going to Melbourne or Sydney. Maybe, for example, my city, Brisbane, it's a lot cheaper than Melbourne and Sydney. There's still a lot of international students. There's 4 universities in and around Brisbane. My university, Griffith University, had a lot of Japanese international students and exchange students. I think some of SUAC's graduates are going there to do postgrad, maybe. I can't really remember. But anyway, it definitely is a once in a lifetime opportunity to go on exchange. mean, my year in Tokyo was an amazing year, and it changed my life. I mean, really, I met my wife on exchange, so it changed my life significantly. But exchange anywhere is a life changing opportunity, and Brisbane is really I've lived in Tokyo, I've lived in Hyogo, I've lived in Shizuoka, I've lived in Korea. Brisbane is still, if I can only live in one place for the rest of my life, I would choose Brisbane for sure. There's a lot of things to see and do. It's affordable for students, and yeah, there are some great universities that have a lot of exchange students, and their exchange programs are really good. So that would be my recommendation for Australia. Is Brisbane, or yeah, Brisbane should be your number one choice, I think.
Where did your interest in Japan and Japanese kind of begin?
Um, Probably, if I'm being honest, I think what was it? Death Note, the anime. I was in my last year of high school, I think, and a few of my friends were very interested in Death Note, and so I started watching as well. And from there, I started listening to lots of different Japanese music, like J rock, and it's a bit embarrassing to say now, but like Visual K kind of music, and it was really really fun to like translate the lyrics, like write them down and go, okay, this word is this English word, and this word is this English, and so after that I started studying Japanese in the language school on Saturday mornings in my
Mhm.
city, and so when I uh, chose what I wanted to study in university, I decided, hey, why not Japanese? I enjoyed it so far. So yeah, I guess because of one particular anime was kind of the starting point, and then yeah, it went from there to music and drama and things like that.
Interesting. So, going back to Korea and Japan and I guess the two there though, the two languages though, what what was it like learning your first foreign language and then your second foreign language, and how can you compare the two at all? Or
So this is a good point for students to understand is when you only speak one language, you aren't your brain doesn't really think in concepts like gainen. For example, neko is neko, but when you study a second language, suddenly you have this animal, this concept, and then it has different names. It can be neko, it can be cat. So this animal is no longer 100% connected to a word. It's this abstract idea. And so when you learn a third language, it's so much quicker to understand or to remember, or to make it much more clearer in your mind. You just think, okay, so there's another word for this animal. It's koyagi. You don't have to learn from the beginning. And on top of that, English is very different to Japanese and Korean. But Japanese and Korean, it's much closer together. So I didn't really use English as a starting point for Korean. I used Japanese. The grammar is very similar at like low levels. As it gets more advanced, it just goes completely different. But um, it was very useful that I already had Japanese to begin with. Especially a lot of the words are very similar. If they have a Chinese root word, I think it's kango in Japanese, then it will there's a very high chance that it will be the same in Korean. So for example, kazoku is kajok, or shimbun is shinmun, or shakai is sawe. It's the same kanji. So a lot of words I could just kind of take from Japanese and understand it very, very quickly. But sometimes that was a negative thing because I would make mistakes because they are similar but different meaning, or used in a different context. So sometimes it was actually not a good thing to have already studied Japanese, but I would say it was definitely more help than not. I think Japanese students definitely have an advantage learning Korean compared to English native speakers. Yeah. Pronunciation is really difficult though, especially for Japanese. In Japan there's a, I, u, e, a. There's five vowels. Korean you have a, I, e, o, a, u, u. Like there's a lot more vowels which don't exist in Japan or in Japanese.
So I heard you played a game at school with students last year. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the game is called Dungeons and Dragons. It sounds very otaku because it is a very otaku kind of game. But basically, this game is a very, very old game with pen and paper. It was made before computers were really like a personal computer, and so it's basically just like group storytelling. One person is kind of the world designer, and the players are a character in the world, and so it's basically just a group role playing adventure, but yeah, I played it with four students last year, and yeah, we had a lot of fun in it. It's a really good activity to improve English because students aren't really thinking about like grammar or pronunciation. You're more thinking about your character, like what should my character do right now, and is this a good thing or is this a bad thing that I should do, and if I do that, well, that's going to be a big problem. And it's a game, but definitely I think it can improve students' English a lot, especially like the vocabulary, and the situation is not the same kind of situations that we talk about in class. So there's a lot of new content that students get to practice their fluency in. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing again in the Eichu Center. Um, at the moment we've got coronavirus and things, so it's a big maybe, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the day that we can play again.
Yeah, I hope that is near. What kind of other things do you do like for fun? I mean, you played that game, I guess, for fun with students, but I mean, in your own personally, what do you do? Like,
Um, Before I came to Shizuoka, I used to play tennis for a long time. I think maybe 10 or 11 years. Maybe even longer, maybe 12 years. But yeah, I was pretty big into tennis for a long time. Um, but after coming to Korea and Shizuoka, it hasn't been as convenient or as easy to find a tennis club, or to be able to go there and back home and things like that. Um, After having a child, your free time definitely goes downhill. So these days, most of my free time is after my daughter goes to bed, which means um, playing computer games is a big hobby these days. Um, I sometimes write. I'm on my writing my second book now. Um, but it takes a lot of thinking, and so a lot of the time I'm very tired at night after working, and so I don't really want to have to think about that. I just want to play a game and kind of relax. But yeah, I mean, I try to write as much as possible, and I'm trying to learn a little bit about coding. I kind of want to make my own PC game with some friends, but that's kind of hard to learn in my free time.
So, you said you're into gaming though, right? What kind of games are you into?
Uh, well, when I was a little bit younger, I really liked RPGs like Final Fantasy. Um, these days, I don't know. I heard one of my friends call it dad games. Um, I don't know if that's what they really are, but strategy games like you have like a map of the world, and you kind of have to manage your kingdom or empire, or use war or diplomacy, and manage things like that. Um, it takes a lot of thinking power. They're not easy games, but I think they're very rewarding to play. Maybe one or two students who watch this might know what game it is, but recently there's a game called Crusader Kings 3 that came out a couple of weeks ago. I've been playing that a lot in my free time.
All right, so I think we'll stop there, and thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Kotaku. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I look forward to having you come and watch the next episode. Thank you.